everybody, I'm Lara Trump coming to you from Studio 45 at Trump Tower in New York City. As the 2020 election gets closer, it's clear that every step of this campaign will require a fight against the radicalism of the left. Joining me with his analysis on the Democrats and radicalism today is a conservative author and commentator, Dinesh D'Souza. Dinesh, we love hearing from you. You always have such great insight into things. Thank you for being with us today.
It's always a pleasure.
So identity politics has absolutely reached the point of becoming radical dogma. Today, Democrats have to be completely woke, if you'll indulge that, about race, gender, and sex. How do you see all of this impacting the 2020 campaign as we approach the election?
Well, I think even it's customary in a primary for Democratic candidates to pivot left because that's the activist base of their party. But normally there's a certain kind of parameter of craziness that keeps things in control because remember, all these statements can be brought back in the general election. It seems the Democrats have forgotten that second part and they're literally going nuts before our eyes, competing, if you will, as to who can be nuttier and who can appeal to the craziest wing of the party. So I think for President Trump, this is a time to break out the popcorn and enjoy himself because they tried to portray him as an extremist, and this is all making him look remarkably statesman-like.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I felt like it was going to end up that way, and let me tell you, they have not disappointed. In fact, in their first debates, the Democrats completely abandoned working-class Americans as well as the rule of law. Let's take a look at this.
A lot of you have been talking tonight about these government health care plans that you've proposed in one form or another. This is a show of hands question, and hold them up for a moment so people can see. Raise your hand if your government plan would provide coverage for undocumented immigrants. Okay, let me start with you, Mayor Buttigieg. Why?
Dinesh, every single person on stage raised their hand to provide health care to illegal immigrants over Americans. What did you think of that?
Well, I mean, let's just start with the phrase undocumented immigrants, as if the only failure here is that they didn't fill out the right form. The second thing is, remember, illegals are not immigrants. The whole point of an immigrant is someone who becomes part of the social compact, that wants to be part of our society, that's granted full membership by the people who are existing here. So the whole thing is a farce. The question is a farce. The answer reveals a certain moral obtuseness. Because remember, a social compact is people who come together and pool risk. These are not people who have paid taxes into the system. The idea that they should be eligible for benefits, it's absolutely outrageous. Even legal immigrants like me, very offended by this idea.
Yeah, and actually, I think when it comes to the people that are most offended, it's legal immigrants, people who have come into this country, who've gone through the full process, who see, you know, you've got to be part of society, as you're saying. And here we're just letting these people in, undocumented, unregulated, and now we're going to all, in this country, taxpayers pay for them to get health insurance. It seems so crazy, I think, to so many people. And we've seen so much change, I feel like, in the Democrat Party. And it has become especially dangerous at certain points to be a conservative and to stand up and voice your opinion. It's dangerous when radicalism turns mainstream, which is what we see happening. In fact, a conservative reporter was just viciously attacked by an Antifa mob. Let's take a look at this. No! Okay, Dinesh, what's really troubling about this whole thing is how the media either ignored or seemed to almost endorse this attack, right?
Well, the reporter, first of all, you know, he's a little guy. He's 5'5" or 5'6". He's gay. He's Asian American. And here's his offense. His offense has been that he has been exposing one after another these hate crime hoaxes that are being perpetrated on campus. Bogus Jussie Smollett style hate crime hoaxes, and he's been on their case. So this is his sin. That's why they hate him. and they want to beat him up.
Yeah.
Now, this kind of fascism on the street, fascism in the name of anti-fascism, I mean, we haven't seen this in my lifetime in this country. You'd have to go back to Europe in the 20s and 30s to see this kind of costumed thugs beating up people in the street, and this being treated as mainstream politics. It's a very bad turn we've taken, and it's very important that these people be held accountable.
Well, and isn't it a problem, Dinesh, that there is no accountability for these people because the mayors in many cases of these cities where this sort of thing takes place really don't do anything. They don't press charges. They don't ask their police force to go after these people in the way that they probably should be?
Yeah, they're somewhat complicit in all this because an atmosphere of lawlessness needs some kind of sanction at the top. Otherwise, it can be stopped. So I think that that's right. There needs to be some sort of a civil rights investigation of all this. I think there needs to be some federal intervention because remember, the constitutional right of free speech applies to all citizens. There's a crazy debate on social media. Was Andy Ngo really a journalist or not? Well, it doesn't matter if he's a journalist or not. We all have the same free speech rights.
Right. No, that's a great point. Well, we see that listen, it has gotten so out of control in so many cases. My husband just a little over a week ago had, a woman spit right in his face just because she didn't agree with his politics. He did nothing to provoke her. So we see that it has gotten out of hand and that people are feeling very emboldened. And it's a sad place that we've come to. And although not physical, assaults against conservatives online have also grown. Isn't this just organized suppression of conservative voices getting worse as we're approaching 2020?
Well, the pretext of all this, of course, is the suppression of hate. And it's important to realize that hate has now become kind of a code word. If you criticize illegals, you are a hater. Andy knows gay Asian American is a hater. I'm a hater. Of course, we don't hate anyone. They just disagree with our politics. And instead of having a legitimate debate and let the people decide come election time, they're acting like they have to rig the rules to exclude hate. Hate has now become essentially a bogus term used by political people to shut down their opposition. A very troubling development.
Yeah. Now, in contrast to the craziness of the Democrats last week, we saw the president overseas. He had such a great trip for the G20. We saw him meeting with world leaders, and he literally has done something that is historic by walking into North Korea, the very first president ever, the sitting president ever to do this. The president has literally brought us from the brink of war when it comes to North Korea to renewed peace talks, yet the left, Dinesh, wants to claim that he is legitimizing Kim Jong-un. What is your reaction to all of this?
Well, my mind flashes back to Reagan's meetings with Gorbachev. Remember, Gorbachev was completely a product of the Soviet system. He came up through the gulag, you might say. Yeah. There was no automatic reason to believe that he was different. Reagan decided to give it a try. He had a sense, almost you may say a statesman-like intuition, that Gorbachev would turn. And he took that risk. Of course, he was open to the same kinds of attacks. He's coddling the Russians and so on. There was a wing, even in the conservative side, that was very critical of Reagan at that time, and yet it produced a historic turn. Whether this will produce the same, I don't know, but it's certainly worth the effort. I mean, it is certainly a breakthrough, and let's see what comes of it. But to condemn President Trump for attempting this, I think reflects a great myopia and really a one-sided kind of hatred of Trump, no matter what he did. If he refused to meet, they'd criticize him for that. If he meets, they criticize him for that. So he should just do what he's doing. He's doing fine.
Yeah, and you know what? I there's something that I feel like should be pointed out when it comes to this entire meeting that they had. The reality is there's no way that we could have gotten into North Korea before the president stepped over the demarcation line there. So the president was literally walking into territory virtually unknown, and he was risking his life in many ways by doing this. I think people are overlooking what a huge step this was for the president to do. I'm sure his security team was not totally pleased with this decision. They probably discouraged him from doing this greatly. But I think in his mind, he knew that maybe one of the only ways forward to, further these talks was to take that step, and he's willing to do it for the United States of America, Dinesh.
I look at it, as an immigrant, I see it really as a very characteristically American act of, I would call it innocence. And here's what I mean. When Reagan stepped out to meet Gorbachev, Reagan's belief was, look, we're Americans, and look, you've got the Soviet Empire, you're armed to the teeth, but look at your crazy society. It doesn't even really work. Look across the border and see how much better things work over here. So I think Trump is making the same point. Hey, Kim Jong-un, you've got this society, but there's another Korea just south of you. Look how well things go over there. Don't you want your society to be a little better? How much longer can you keep this craziness going? There's a belief that common sense will break through despite the crust of ideology and the crust of history. It's an expression of American innocence and American optimism.
Yeah, well, we know that this president will do whatever it takes for this country, and that was a great step there. Dinesh, thank you as always for your fight for this country and for the president, and thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
We've just begun a long journey to keep America great, and every step along the way will require our biggest fight ever against the radicalism of the Democrats. That's the real news for today. I'm Laura Trump from Studio 45 at Trump Tower in New York City. Thanks for joining us, everybody.